Okay. So again, I'm Kellick. I'm the Earl Marshal of the Middle Kingdom. I'm joined by Diedrich, the deputy for archery, and I'm joined by Uthin, who has a strong-looking chest right there. There he is. There's his face. Who is the deputy for Thrown Weapons, and we also have Isabel, who is the clerk of the roster. So the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to be here to take any kind of feedback or any kind of questions that anybody might have. I don't know if Diedrich or Uthin have anything that they want to talk about in particular, but we'll give them both chances. Diedrich, would you like to say anything at the start?
Don't have a whole lot. I try and get information out to the marshals at least as often as I can. I am interested in hearing from people about what's going on. And if people don't know, we are working on adding Atlatl to the Middle Kingdom as an overlap between both thrown weapons and archery. So if people have questions about that, we can talk about that too.
Great. Uthin, do you have anything that you'd like to say? I'm catching you as
yeah, I'm trying to finish up real quick. We are going to be adding an experiment for the plumbata on thrown weapons, which are the Roman style of darts, basically. And I have to say that with a quote because darts officially are not a part of the thrown weapons. That came down from STA Capora. We will be updating our manual. I have to hear back on when exactly we're going to be sending that out to the populace for any comments or review. We're hoping to have it by mid-November. There are some things that we are getting straightened out with SCA Capora over the whole darts issue and the fact that they were never supposed to be a part of us, and there was a little bit of an oversight. So, oops, we apologize for that. They're still completely fine for games, and they can fall under ANS, but we're going to have to move forward on exactly how we're going to incorporate that. So plumbata is going to replace them since they are a appropriate time period one. So we'll start the experiment on that one after we get back to throwing, and hopefully the new missile weapons handbook for thrown weapons will be out, and we will have the ability to add Atlatl to either us, archery, or if we're going to have a separate manual, Dietrich and I have you to discuss how we want to handle the implementation of the rules on that one. And that's all I have right now. If there aren't any questions, that'll come up later.
Great. Isabel, do you have anything that you want to say? I know that you're just here to kind of listen a bit.
No, not really.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure you had a chance. Okay. So we will go ahead and open it up for any questions or any kind of feedback that anybody might have. You can either raise your hand physically, you can do the icon on here, or just kind of shout it out.
Yeah, this is James Barkley. We're still working on Atlatl, and you say it's going to be an overlap. What is an overlap exactly? So that way I've got a better idea in my head.
What we're working towards is it will be an add-on warrant that either an archery marshal or a thrown weapons marshal can get. That way, a thrown weapons marshal doesn't have to go through an MIT process for archery and vice versa. Either one will be able to run Atlatl when they have the right amount of space and the correct safety zones and targets and everything. But we don't require either archers or thrown weapons people to be marshals in both, and we want everybody to be able to participate in Atlatl, whichever they do.
To add on to what he's saying, if that wasn't completely clear, think of it like when it comes to heavy and you're getting an authorization or rapier where you get a special authorization to do like 2-weapon fighting or something, it would just be an added kind of tick that we add to. If you're a thrown weapons marshal specifically, we would just add to that.
What type of targets would Atlatl be using?
I believe the primary would probably be hay bale. That would seem to be the most logical in situations where we can. I don't believe hard target is a good idea. I did see some issue and heard some feedback when I was at Penzic that hard targets are generally a little bit less forgiving and they're more damaging to the actual atlatl dart.
What I've found, and I, for the longest, used the same black foam that I used for archery. And I would have it set at distances of 5, 10, and 15, and the darts would stick. And I use 6-foot dart, and they stay stuck. You
Yeah.
don't-
Yeah. Yeah, it can be either hay bales or it can be a foam archery target. Hard thrown weapons targets, probably not a good idea.
not the-
And it
no.
depends on the construction of the archery target. That would be up to the marshal running it and what they want for their targets.
A lot of the darts just have like an oversized archery style tip. So you're not creating any different kind of damage. You're still making a puncture in the mat, which is what most archery equipment creates anyway. So it's not as if we're creating a hole like what a field point would do. So, you know,
I think it'll come down to between Dietrich and I talking about what we'll accept as proper darts. Already archery and thrown weapons has a certain legal what weapons are allowed and which ones aren't. And when it comes to archery, you can't use like broadheads or anything of that nature that would be overly damaging. So when it comes to atlatl and the extra mass and momentum that can tear up certain archery targets, we would have to look at clearly how that's going to affect long-term damage to a more sustainable target that isn't a hay bale.
Correct.
yeah.
Okay, next question. Yeah, Liz.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So I'm following up on a rumor I heard, something about crossing over from combat archery martial authorizations into target archery martial, I shouldn't say authorizations, warrants. And I'm just curious, what's the status of this plan?
So that's a question for me. That's exciting. I thought it was going to be all our questions for Dietrich and Uther or Uther. So exciting. So we are currently looking to revise a lot of how we do combat archery and siege in the Middle Kingdom. We want to make the process easier for people to get authorized in the use of the weapons, as well as easier for marshals to get there to go through the process and get a warrant. It's something that we've been having meetings and having some discussion around, and we're looking to hopefully get kind of a finalized rolling out probably within a month and a half to 2 months. We're having a couple meetings next month, and then we're gonna hopefully get it worked out and get that hammered out. Something that I don't. So what I'm trying to say is I don't have any kind of hard guidelines on what's going to actually happen in the final draft. But what there has been some conversation, and I don't know if I've talked to Dietrich much about this, about trying to have allowances made to have target archery marshals more easily be able to become a combat archery marshal, or to have a combat archery MIT go to a target archery marshal to maybe do bow inspections to get that kind of training knocked out, to try to make it easier where there's some overlap between the two areas. So I don't have hard and fast specifics on how exactly that's going to happen or go, but it's something that we want to have happen and that we're looking into.
We have not talked about it, but I would be more than happy to have combat archery MITs come learn about bow inspections.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for you facilitating some conversation there with me and Diedrich. You have a follow-up question, Liz?
Well, I was just going to say, just an observation, and I'll keep it very short. When we had combat archery martial training here in the Cinnabar vicinity about 8 years ago, it was Eric who came and conducted that training over the course of an entire day. Okay. And I have to say, for my part, we got more hands-on understanding of how to inspect bows and crossbows and just, I mean, Eric brought this traveling road show of bow carnage, okay, of every possible defect and problem and why this is wrong and why that won't work. And we came away from that saying, it's too bad target archery marshals don't get the same intensive clinic. So I'm here to say thank you very much. I'll mute and look forward for more.
Diedrich, that might be something to look into about having some kind of seminars on things that are going maybe at a martial rum or something like that.
Yep. Countess Aveline had put together several refresher classes, equipment inspection being included. The last martial rum, we had a crossbow inspection and care class as well. So we have started on that process. We need to keep adding to it. And it's also one of the reasons we encourage MITs to work a shift at Penzic on inspections, because you see a bigger variety of equipment there than anywhere else in the known world. And it'll take time to build up more training, but the process has started, and that's one place we need to add more.
I hope I'm going to say this name right. ATES, A-T-E-S?
Atesh.
ATES, sorry.
I was just wondering, if you guys end up doing that, would the existing combat archery marshals then have to pick up the target archery marshal also?
No, we're just trying to make it easier for people to become a marshal. Not saying that combat archery marshals have to become target archery marshals. That's we won't ever have that kind of requirement. If a combat archery marshal wants to become combat archery wants to become target archery marshal, that's great. We can always use more marshals in every area, but it won't be required.
Anyway.
Cav?
Yeah, so as far as thrown weapons, you're talking about the AT-ATL and the darts and coming up new. Is there anything else coming down the pipeline that's going to change from what the current throwing weapons handbook is?
So the only change is that there has never been a clear definition of what to wear. And I know that sounds dumb, but foot protection is one area that there was a lot of controversy at Penzic as to what is properly, excuse me, what is proper foot protection for a thrown weapons range. And it is not clearly defined in the book. And I am adding into it that closed-toed shoes or at least toe protection of some type be required. I have seen reports and have also experienced myself people walking up to like get their weapon and they didn't realize the knife bounced back and they stabbed themselves with the toe. Penzic's requirements is only that you have the bottom of your foot covered. And even once during that time while I was still at Penzic before my health took a major turn and I couldn't finish the last 4 days. One person did get poked in the toe, not severely enough to warrant anything, but it did bring up the discussion that properly protecting your toes is more vital than what we had considered before, especially when we look at where we get to have thrown weapons ranges sometimes are not the most well maintained, and therefore grass and other things that are sticking up. I know there's been a little bit of feedback on that, and some people are unhappy because their period shoes may be open toed or something like that. That'll be one where I'm going to have a better discussion with Calic also after the handbook comes out as to whether or not the definition in there is open enough for people that are using proper period toes like Roman shoes. If how we want to handle that. But that is going to be the biggest change I think that's going to happen, is that we're going to be a little bit more defined on how we protect people's feet. Because that has been where we have feet and hands seem to be our most prominent injuries. Obviously, with thrown weapons, you're throwing a weapon from your hand. But ironically enough, your toes and the soles of your feet get damaged when people aren't wearing proper foot protection. And I'm all about safety, and I hope that doesn't rub anyone the wrong way, that I plan to like do that for safety's sake. But I have heard a little bit of a pushback on it of, well, period shoes don't have this, or so we will have to find a way to accommodate that as well. Which is why it hasn't been 100% implemented yet, and why the new handbook will go out for populace feedback and comment before we ratify it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm 100% for putting shoes. I have on my range for Shire have always stated you must wear covered toes to throw on my range. So I'm glad to see that that's possibly something that's going to happen. Thank you.
Yes.
One of our local marshals over here, he approached me about the idea of having loaner, like almost like steel-toed shoes to put over top of people who are wearing like sandals and things like that. And that seemed like a fine idea to me too, to try to have something like that in his kit to do. Not that it would be a required thing, but he wanted to try to get more people to throw, and he felt uncomfortable having people in sandals himself. So that was going to be a requirement that he was going to have as well.
One thought that I had, since you bring it up, Your Grace, is I know they make generally like a rubberized or some kind of like shoe over thing for like winter shoes, for like ladies' shoes, so that way they don't get snow and ice and things of that nature. I was looking into whether or not it would be possible to get like a bulk of that for my own personal, and that could be handed from like Thrown Weapons Marshal to Kingdom Marshal, where it's just something that can at least slide over while the person's on the range, so people can still participate. Because one, I want safety. Two, I want participation. I want you to enjoy yourself out there, but I don't want a risk of you getting hurt while you're out there. Knives bouncing can bounce into any part of the body. But if you're wearing sandals or bare feet and you don't see it in the grass as you're approaching, that's just an accident that doesn't need to happen, that can easily be avoided, as opposed to some of the other things that aren't as controllable. I'd prefer to err on the side of caution, and I don't want to upset people, but I also don't want to have to worry about sending someone away to a hospital for stitches because of something that could have been avoided.
Right. Great answer. Any other questions?
So just a couple of comments. One of them would be on, I agree with the shoes being covered. I mean, in period, you didn't see fencers going around with masks. You didn't necessarily see armored fighters with their faces covered like ours. So safety makes sense. So I don't see there really why there should be an issue with that. And then the second thing was on the darts. With it being A&S and thrown weapons, is there some place that we can have a basic description that's out there, even for the A&S, that these are the minimum requirements that you need to be safe? I've been going off of thrown weapons, knife guidelines, basically, when I've been running it just to be on the safe side. And I don't know if there's anything out there for the darts specifically that?
Okay. So this is the reason why we're having a little bit of a problem getting the book out to people at the moment, is that we want to have in the Thrown Weapons Handbook a definition and a guideline for how ANS should handle darts. So that way there is a guideline for safety and a guideline for how they should be inspected and viewed and done properly and safely. We want to put that in the Thrown Weapons Handbook because it makes the most sense for it to be there as a thrown, item. The Capora wants to make it very clear that if we add it into the Missile Weapons Handbook for thrown weapons, that we are not including it as a thrown weapons activity. We are defining what is safe for ANS based on thrown weapons that are already in use. But a dart range will not ever be reported to myself. It will be reported to ANS. And that's the only reason right now we haven't gotten the book out for feedback sooner, is that we have to get them to say that's okay for us to put it in our handbook, but not have it be a thrown weapons activity, because they're very clear that they do not want that, because a dart wasn't a weapon. And it's just clearly a matter of, if nothing else, it's a matter of semantics over the fact that because of the way the historical nonprofit side of it works at their level, we're not adding something that isn't historically accurate to a weapon that isn't. So it would be defined in our handbook, this ANS activity falls under these guidelines for safety based on what is already proven safe by SCA Capora and the Middle Kingdom. But your reports will go to ANS and they will not go to the Thrown Weapons Marshal. That is what we hope to have approved before we send it out for commentary feedback.
Frozen.
I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. But at this point, I'm good using the knife throwing space and range and stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
As long as you have a set rule that you use for your own personal safety, I have to say this. I cannot, under my guideline of authority currently, tell you how to run a dart range, because it doesn't fall under me anymore, and it was never supposed to. So I smile and say, whatever you're doing to be safe, I applaud as a marshal. But from the Kingdom thrown weapon side of things, I can't officially say yes or no. I can just applaud you for having a good idea on how to be safe. But officially, I can't say anything else. His Grace Calic can say something a little bit more, because it does still fall under the caveat of whether or not that can be, it's not a martial activity in general, but there's this weird crossover, but it doesn't fall under me anymore.
Right.
At best, it falls under Calic, at best.
Yeah, so what I would say on that is I think we can take it out of our handbook if that's a hold up on getting the handbook out. Let's take out that section because it's if we're no longer considering it a martial activity, it shouldn't be in a martial handbook. So we'll take that out, and we can get the handbook out for commentary. And maybe what we need to do is I'm going to try to remember, but if I don't, can you drop me a message reminding me to email I'll message the Kingdom MOS and ask, get their thoughts on making that an activity. Otherwise, there are many arts and science activities in the society that don't fall under, we don't have to have any kind of guidelines on it. This is something that we recognize in our kingdom, and maybe we, as a courtesy to people, we put out a recommended guidelines for dart activity in the Middle Kingdom. So it's not the official rules. It's saying this is, if you want to have darts, this is how we'd say do it safely. Because
we could strip it out of our handbook and send it over to MOAS and let them evaluate whether or not they feel that is how they would like it to go, and we can just strip it out of our handbook entirely.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if it's an arts and science activity, the MOES doesn't have a handbook or a guideline for how to do blacksmithing, or
Right.
have guidelines on how to play hurley, or how to play any kind of period game at all. So they're not martial activities; they're ANS activities. ANS, you don't necessarily have to have guidelines. So I think it could be a courtesy thing that we say, hey, we reckon this is something that happens in the Middle Kingdom. Here's how we would recommend that you do it. It's, I think, what we need, what we has been the guidance that I think we've been given, that we can't run the marshal, but we can suggest how people should do it.
Okay, and then that will make it easier if we don't have to jump through the hurdle of describing something that does not fall under either of our purviews.
Right. I do think it's good that we have developed a system that seems to work well, that we should put out. These are what we had been using as recommendations, with the caveat that it's not a martial activity. This is just how we'd prefer to see it done, or how we would suggest it be done.
Okay. I will pass it on to the person rewriting the handbook, who's a much better technical writer than I am.
That's handy that you have one of those.
So
It is very handy. I have one.
is it still possible to include the ANS dart activity with a thrown weapons range that's officially marshaled? Or should they be separated completely?
According to SCA Capora, you cannot throw darts on my thrown weapons range because a dart is not a weapon. And that comes as of this most recent PENSIC. The SCA's Thrown Weapons Marshal, Capora level, who just stepped down in June, made it known that it was denied at the Capora level, and implementation of such as an ANS activity was fine, but it was misled to me that it had fallen under us, and we had put it that we, the thrown weapons community, had pushed forward on implementing it, and we weren't supposed to. And I had no idea that that was the case until this most recent PENSIC. Not that he was, upset about it, but he's like, no, based on how our nonprofit education part of it goes, we have to separate it because it doesn't fall under a weapon categorization.
So
Have we checked into other kingdoms to see what they're doing and how they're handling the use of darts?
Most kingdoms don't have darts.
Okay.
So
because they were told no by SCA Capora that they do not fall under thrown weapons, and that the idea of them even being ANS in period was a bit sketchy. So they've let them pass under ANS, but they're not exactly gung-ho about it. So most kingdoms, when I was on the Thrown Weapons range and had the opportunity to talk to marshals of the other kingdoms, there's only one other kingdom that does it, and it had always been an ANS activity to them. And that was, I don't remember which one, but it was Washington State.
Oh, that'd be on
somewhere that also had climate problems of being able to have an activity year round.
Right.
Sure. Radigan had made a comment that the MOES probably does not have levels of experience and safety training that you all have. And what they may think is functional may not be practical or useful when implemented as an arts activity. Radigan, what I'm suggesting is that we can't tell an event on a martial level what non-martial activities they may or may not do. If an event the example I keep coming back to is blacksmithing. If an event wants to have blacksmithing as the Office of the Martial Activity Safety, I can't tell them not to have blacksmithing, or I can't tell them not to have sewing or anything like that. Darts falls, and what we've been told is that darts falls into that same category. So from a martial perspective, I can't tell an event to not have darts because it doesn't fall under our purview, is what I've heard.
Right.
So what we are saying is that perhaps we should put out the rules that we've been using, saying, hey, these are the guidelines that we would recommend. And the question was, can a dart marshal run it? So all you really have to do from a semantic point is, I guess, put a rope or a barrier between one side of your list and the other side of the list. And over here, it's an ANS activity, and over here, it's thrown weapons. And I think that gets around the role, or not have the thrown weapons marshal also be marshaling the darts at the same time. You might need to have two people doing that.
So this is exactly how it was explained to me by Edmund, or Edward. Sorry, Edmund was former king. Edward, who was the person who explained it to me, is that if you are a warranted thrown weapons marshal, nothing says you cannot run a darts range. You just don't fill out a report to the thrown weapons marshal at activities. You cannot have a thrown weapons marshal run a darts range while running a thrown weapons range. So Kellick, you are absolutely correct. Is if we put darts out on the same area and we separate and say, this is the ANS person, this is the thrown weapons thing, as long as that one marshal isn't running both, then it's okay. There has to be a person that says, okay, it's time for darts people to go play. And the marshal of the thrown weapons range can restrict the thrown weapons part of it, but they cannot restrict the darts portion at the same time.
Right. So I would say they could even do it at the same event. They just can't be doing it at the same time. You can't supervise both activities. Radigan, you have your hand up. I think you might want to make a comment on this.
Yeah, what I was intending to say is that as the ANS, okay, if they want to go ahead with the darts experiments or the darts activities, I really think it would be in the best interest for safety for if ANS decides to move forward with it, they actually have their people come and talk with you guys, find out what the safety practices are, basically use you as a resource for information and for training. I'm not saying that we, the marshal, not me, we take over those activities. What I'm saying is I think that it would be really helpful and good for everybody in the long term if, as the ANS community decides to move forward with that, they actually work with you to develop standards and learn how to set up ranges safely, learn, how to monitor things to make sure that nobody accidentally gets hurt. I'm not saying that it should be part of the marshal of the marshalate to do, but I think that it would be a good idea, and they would probably appreciate the help and the assistance because they may not be as comfortable as you guys are with, going through setting up and making sure things are safe, or even being aware that they need to worry about certain things. That's all.
Okay, those are good points. And I would expect that if an event wanted to have darts, I suspect that a thrown weapons marshal would go and run the range in the guise of not a thrown weapons marshal. They just go and run it because they know how to do it. Which is I think saying.
I have told any one of the marshals under me that if they're approached to do a darts activity, I have already informed them that they don't report it to me and that they're doing so as an ANS activity. That information is slowly making its way through full dissemination. So yes, the idea that they can come to us and ask us for help and training in making sure that they move forward with it safely, I'm 100% behind, and will completely, my brain's not working at the moment but support any marshal under the thrown weapons that wants to make sure that people are safe in the SCA doing something of that nature. They're just becoming aware that it's not us anymore, so we don't officially say you can come ask me how to set up a thrown weapons range, and I can tell you how to set up a thrown weapons range, and you can take that to heart and decide that you want to set a darts range up based on the same parameters, and that's awesome. Or you can say, well, you're a marshal and I don't have to care, and you're right, I can't do anything about it. And unfortunately, neither can is Grace Kellick. It's not us. That would be the MOAS person then going, well, you asked him for something and then you didn't follow through, and now we have a guy with a hole in his hand because you didn't listen to something. But that's not us anymore. So it's a weird, touchy to be honest, for safety reasons, I wish that it could just stay with us. So at least there would be some safety parameter things over it. But I guess the nonprofit definition of how we run is the hiccup, is because there's no historical evidence of darts existing as a weapon, means that they cannot be called a thrown weapon, which I will agree with from a master's degree in ranged warfare, that there is no historical evidence that it was ever used as a weapon. So I can agree with their stance on the fact that it's not, but from a safety area, I kind of wish we still had a little bit of ability to have more input than what we're going to be allowed,
Okay.
just for safety.
Have you had a comment?
Yeah, I realize it's gonna go to ANS, but are we still gonna suggest that there still be a sort of inspection on them? Because I mean, we do that for archery, we do it for our thrown axes. We inspect them. If somebody brings them to the list, we make sure they're safe in that. I mean, with ANS, I'm going to assume when they go to sew, they're not inspecting the needles. They're not doing all that. But when it comes to darts, you want to make sure that they are solid. They're not going to splinter. They're not going to come back in pieces. And that is that something that we would suggest to the ANS, and that these are things that probably need to be inspected before throwing?
Yes. What we can't, like, I don't expect that the ANS is going to set up their own form of marshalate to do something. What we're going to do is we'll share, these are, if you would like to run a darts ANS activity at your event, these are the recommended policies and procedures that we would advise you to do. And we would suggest that maybe you reach out to a thrown weapons marshal to run your arts and science activity.
One thing I will add to that is there is one positive to all of this that to keep in mind. One major positive, and it's great that you asked that, Cav, because it does come up with inspection and it comes up with safety, is the fact that it is not a thrown weapon means that the ANS technically, if they want to allow it, can use plastic tipped barroom darts like you go down to Walmart and buy, because it doesn't fall under a historical reenacted weapon. It no longer has to be a wooden dart with a metal tip on it in a dartboard or cardboard or some other type of thing that we have used before. So the only positive to all of this is that if ANS wants to push forward on allowing darts as an activity that they can run and they can feel comfortable with, they're 100% allowed to use store-bought plastic darts if they feel that that's what's safe, because it does not fall under the marshalate and therefore does not have to have 100% historic accuracy. And when I say 100%, up to the level of safety, obviously, it was already discussed that, you don't wear masks or helms and things of that nature. But that is the positive that I at least take away from this, is that it does open up the activity to more people that may have wanted to be able to do it, but felt restricted by the fact that you had to use wooden darts with metal tips on specific types of targets because it was a thrown weapon, and it's not anymore. So it will at least allow those people that want to do a winter type activity to do so with, I would hope, a modicum of safety by just going to Walmart and buying plastic stuff. While I don't like the idea of going and using, things that aren't historically period, and because that's part of what we're about. But from a safety level, since it's not a martial art activity, if that's the way they want to run it, that is 100% okay now.
Gotcha.
So I think we've covered darts. Does somebody have another topic they'd like to discuss?
I
Please.
did have a quick question. Other kingdoms for thrown weapons include the plumbata and sling. Is there any plan to move forward with sling in the mid-realm?
Right now, I'm going to concentrate on the plumbata. The sling is only in 2 kingdoms at the moment. So I am, yes, there is a plan to look into slings. I am not going to say that it's going to happen or it won't happen. The Plumbata has more overall known world already been implemented, so that experiment will be easier to get through, finalize. There's a very strong historical accuracy, a historical reference to the way the Plumbata worked and how it could be constructed and easily implemented into thrown weapons. The sling has been implemented only in 2 kingdoms, but there are some safety concerns even in those 2 kingdoms as to what happens when a person swings crossing the like there's a lot of things around that one that I won't say no, but I can't guarantee that it would ever be approved here. I am in talks with some of the 2 kingdoms that have it, and a couple of individuals who have had some extensive experience with using slings. His Grace Seto, who was in Greece and actually had the opportunity to use some real ones there, has offered to teach what he's learned over there and be a part of the discussion from firsthand knowledge. So I can't promise anything yet, but it is a good question. And what I saw at Penzic left me hopeful. I wasn't too thrilled in the first place, but from what I've seen and the way they've implemented it, I think there is some possibility for it to be here. But the most likely answer I would have is that my predecessor will probably be the one to implement it. I probably would not be the one myself, given I only have about 1.5 years left, and I think it's going to take at least a year to finish up the Plumbata one. I will not be the one to finalize the slings.
Next question or comment?
Grace, I have a question. Combat archery, will that be covered in the meeting tomorrow?
So tomorrow is on armored combat. It could be. If people talk about combat archery tomorrow, we can talk about combat archery tomorrow.
Thank you.
Cope has a question. What are we doing to get more MITs and marshals? I don't know that we have a direct recruitment plan. I think having more people do marshals is a good thing. I don't know that I don't know that I've ever given that much thought. I've always kind of thought that people decide they like the society and want to serve, and they start doing more. But that's a fair point, Cope. You're blowing my mind.
I always bring it up to people when they're out on my ranges if they're interested in it. But from personal, if a person doesn't feel the call to serve, I don't know that I want them to be a marshal, because if you don't feel the call to serve, I don't know that you're going to put a lot of, into it. But I love the idea of finding a way to recruit those that might be interested and just don't know how to go about starting. That would be something I think His Grace would be, blowing my mind too. Maybe people don't know what it takes to become a marshal, and maybe if we can find some process. Dietrich?
We actually have gotten quite a few new archery marshals starting up since we've reopened, which is great. First step is check the Kingdom website and find your regional marshal, whether it's thrown weapons or archery, and send them an email. Tell them you want to help out and, take that step. We're always happy to have new MITs, and it's part of the culture, as His Grace was saying. Anybody who, feels like they want to contribute can certainly become a marshal.
So Cope had a comment. She said, I have struggled and I've been here for 3 or 4 decades. Where do we start? I don't know exactly what you mean, Cope. Like where to start is becoming an MIT or where to start with getting more people to do it. Yeah, so I don't know what you,
It looks like I need to contact Astradir Asaturi. I'll take care of that myself.
okay, fantastic. And I saw that Uller responded, I kind of think the same thing. My puppy wants my lap. Radigan said, what about expanding the pool of people that do nothing more than ammo inspection? It's been, I'll let Diedrich answer that too, but I don't, it's what we do with archery inspections. You're only really inspecting a couple arrows. So I don't know that that adds a lot of time to the inspection process for archery. For combat archery, it does, but we've been discussing a little bit too over there, but I don't know that there's much of a call for it on the archery range. Diedrich, do you have thoughts on that?
That does sound more like a combat archery question. We inspect all bows and we inspect a usually somewhat random selection of arrows. If we start finding problems, we'll inspect all arrows. Also, we will ask, the archer if they've had problems or if they've maintained their arrows. So it depends on the circumstances, but any marshal can do inspections.
Okay, Radigan had a follow-up. She says that combat archery, especially I've spent tons of time inspecting arrows and bolts. I can tell you I had a meeting earlier today talking a little bit about combat archery inspections, and that's something that came up, something that we're looking into. So it's something that maybe we'll be expanding, but I don't have a hard and fast rule on what's going to happen at this time. Next question, comment?
Just to comment on the MIT process. I have run into several people who said, oh, I started this in the past, but because of this delay or that delay, they didn't complete it in the allotted amount of time. Is there any thoughts on expanding the time or having a reintroduction process where they don't have to start from zero or anything along those lines?
We have changed for archery marshals the time to 2 years because we're seasonal and people have a whole lot of trouble getting to enough events in one season. So it's already been expanded, and we paused everybody's clock during the shutdown. So, anybody who started before we shut down, it didn't count against them on time. And I'm more than willing to be, flexible in that kind of thing. I think it's abusive to volunteers to tell somebody they're a week late and they can't finish. That achieves nothing except
I
abusing
won't do that
people.
either. Thrown Weapons did the same thing. We expanded to 3 years. We were at 18 months. I don't know why we had a weird number like that, but we doubled our time as well. No one during the COVID shutdown was affected negatively by not being able to. Personally, I'm of the same mind Diedrich is, that I will work with someone. If they're a week, 2 weeks off, I'm definitely not going to care. I'll be honest with you, unless Kellick slaps my hand for it, you can be 6 months late. If you're interested in being a Thrown Weapons Marshal and you show that effort and real life got in your way for some reason, but you can come up and you can show me that you're a competent Thrown Weapons Marshal and it's 6 months past the deadline, I'm still going to approve it until Kellick slaps my hand and tells me not to.
I'm not going to slap your hand on that.
Yeah.
I'm all for more marshals, and I have no issue with people being with us being generous and all of that. If somebody can't complete, like, I would see more of a case if somebody's not completing the MIT process over 5 or 10 years or something like that. Like, that's long enough that we need to do some more stuff. Wolfric said he would like to see the time extended to 3 years to make sure the marshal is truly ready, because there is a lot to learn and we should make sure someone is really ready. So there are people, I mean, the time extended to 3 years, I don't know that there's a problem with that. If some people are going to go through the process quicker, some people are going to take a little bit longer, and I think that that's okay. There might be people who are really driven and spend a lot of time doing it, and they can get through the process quicker. It's more important that we have quality marshals than speedy marshals, I guess.
I would rather quality over quantity.
And it's also worth noting, we don't stop learning when we're done with the paperwork. You know, you'll always find somebody with some new equipment or some new idea. We all should always keep adding to our knowledge base. So, you know, making the paperwork take longer really is not, you know, to me, the point of it.
Dick, should we have
yeah.
a minimum? Dick and asked, should we have a defined minimum time? And we kind of do. You have to work 3 events, so that's not like a number of days or months, but I guess that's 3 days at least. But I think that that's a fair way to go about it.
Yeah,
The fact that each one of those days could be covered as a different day in Penzic, maybe, is that where Dickens getting to? Is, do you believe that being able to finish everything during one Penzic event is not enough knowledge base, and it should at least extend over a longer period of time? Because that would be where I would bring the question of, if you're getting fast tracked through during a Penzic, did you really get to experience enough? While Penzic has a lot, did you really get to experience a lot? Would that be the question you're kind of bringing up, Dickon?
Yeah, that's more where and because we've had some discussion, you know, because I've had some people like, okay, I really want to get this, and it's like, I mean, one of the things, you know, that actually, you know, I spoke with Dietrich about it, and we had kind of pushed back, because we told him, okay, yeah, okay, you got you know, you managed to get all the 3 like within a month. But one of the things we definitely want to see is we want to make sure that you do a report, because, you know, there haven't been in the report yet. And it's like, okay, you know, I said, okay, you know, we want you to at least do 1 report. The next one coming up, of course, is Domesday, which is, you know, a very good one to do. And he's like, well, okay, I guess, but and so I don't know. But I don't think that's official. I think that's kind of, and I don't know if it needs to be that official, but it's just, since we're having the discussion, and you know, because someone said, okay, you know, we want 3 years to make sure the marshal is truly ready. Well, 3 years is the upper limit. We really have no, other than, yes, you have to do 3 events. You know, you have to minimum 3 events to get them all the signatures.
Right, Dick, and what I would say on that is filing reports is important. I don't know that it's a reason to stop people from taking the test or completing the process. If marshal
Does the Max have something to there, Kellick?
Yeah, I'll get him here.
Yeah, you know what?
Okay.
I just have a simple comment. Penzic is 1 event. I don't care if you work there every day for 2 weeks. It's 1 event. That's it. That's my comment. 1 event.
I'll comment on that too. But
okay.
Dick, and I think that if Marshall doesn't submit their report at the Domesday, then they don't get to continue keeping their warrant. So it's kind of a delaying thing anyway. And Max, I think that I think Penzic is a special case that while it is 1 event, I think that if you work a shift at the archery range or at Thrown Weapons, you might see more people at that 1 day than you normally would at a bigger event throughout the kingdom. So yeah, Penzic is 1 event. You're not wrong, but each day is more or less the equivalent to a bigger event.
I would like to follow up to just
You're
to
more
give Max
generous than I am, that's all.
For archery, I do not see Penzic as multiple events. You can get a sign off in each category at Penzic. However, Penzic archery is not under mid-realm rules. I think it's an enormously useful place to learn. It's not run under mid-realm rules, it's run under Penzic rules. And it's good for some sign-offs. at one time, you could do all of your MIT work in 1 week at Penzic, and I do not want that these days. I want people to learn the mid-realm rules and much more about how a smaller range is run and set up, because you cannot do range setup at Penzic unless you're there the Monday of Peace Week. You know, there's some things you can't do there. So I want to see people have the chance to learn at Penzic, but not assume it's good for everything.
And from my opinion on it, to Max's point and Dietrich's point, it is one event. Kellick, you're right. You're going to see a lot of people. I'll tell you, in one day on the Thrown Weapons range, it was 50 to 55 people. I can tell you that's the most I have ever seen on a Thrown Weapons range when it comes to the Middle Kingdom. But over the course of 4 days, it was the same 50 people with the same 50 weapons. There was not a variation. And to Max's point, it was one event. And in the Middle Kingdom, we may see the same 5 people come to a range and we may fall into the same problem. But Penzic didn't give me anything more than the fact that I had 10 times the same people 4 days in a row. I mean, I had one teenager that was there the minute we opened the range, and he didn't leave until the range was closed. And he's wants to be an MIT. The only reason he's not is he's 17 and isn't legally allowed to be a marshal. The kingdom he's out of has basically said, when you turn 18, you are one, because you spent the last 3 years learning and going to multiple things. So to the point, I would like to see Penzic be classified as one event that they get, and at least be in the Middle Kingdom for another event to see that difference. A range that's been set up by people that have been doing it for 10, 15, however many years is not the same thing as a range that is being set up by somebody who's been doing it for 2 months. And that is something where we, the experienced marshals, need to see those inexperienced people try and do it on their own and see if they got something right, because somebody that's been doing it for 20 years on a staff of 10 came over and told them do it this way and they didn't know why. Because if you don't know why to do something, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to understand why that is a rule. Just because you're told to do it that way doesn't mean that you understand the reason why we've implemented that rule. And so I have to agree that Penzic should not be able to complete an entirety of a signature to get a marshal. I think we in the Middle Kingdom should at least require at least one event be local to us.
Okay, and you two are the experts on that. So, and you have given your ruling. That seems fair to me. Cope commented that the last time we had archery in Phoenix, we had to get a marshal from 3 hours away to attend. Let's not make barriers in the name of better training. Let's train better. And then she, as a comment on that, hence we need better training, not longer training. So I think you both, I think she's in agreement there. Atez, is your comment on this? If not, we have a question from Joe Herbert about the Atlatl still.
I have a question about they were talking about the range setup, and bear with me because I do not have an MIT form in front of me. Is there a different one that involves thrown weapons? Because the last 2 thrown weapons MITs I had pop up, when the MIT forms went off of the library, which I actually do approve of, I didn't actually have a copy of a blank MIT form. And the one that we ended up acquiring doesn't actually say anything about setting up a thrown weapons range. It says something about setting up an archery range. So we kind of crossed it out and put thrown weapons, but I wasn't sure if there was a different form that I just hadn't seen.
Give me a moment and I'll pull them out, at least on my side.
The MIT form I know of, we simply substitute range setup for the space where it says authorizations, because the form was simply expanded to cover other martial activities from the original armored.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, because I remember when I filled it out for them, I I ended up crossing out something that didn't apply to us and putting in that it was the range setup.
Yep, that's the way we do it in archery.
Ethan, what are the categories that you have on your
So the Middle Kingdom Marshal in Training appointment form has on it equipment inspections, authorizations, subcategorized, range setup and layout, with archery being there. Archery and thrown weapons should both be under range setup and layout under the authorizations portion. That thrown weapons wasn't added into there because in order to put both words in there, the type would have been so small nobody would have been able to read it. Authorizations should just be, if we were going to revise this form, authorizations / range setup. Then marshaling the list and administration are the 4 categories that are required. But it does come down to, at the bottom, special requirements, archery, rapier request. So there is a set of specialized requirements under the 2012 revised version that we use. And I know that's 10 years old, but I believe that's the one we're still using. So there is, so it says for thrown weapons, the one that says range setup layout under archery does apply to thrown weapons. They added archery, and I commented that would be confusing to the Thrown Weapons Marshal, and they just printed it with archery in there because they said, well, archery's a bigger thing and you can just use the same one. I said, that's fine, but it's still a confusing statement to have on there instead of just saying range setup layout in parentheses. So you're completely fine using that one and crossing it out to say thrown weapons because it was supposed to be that way.
Okay, then Joe had a question. What kind of timeline are we looking at for Adelanto? How will the process look for adding the rate? I would like to add it to archery for next year's Harvest Day in September. Will it still be experimental at that time? So we are, Diedrich and Uthan are putting together the rules for that right now. Then so that's the first step. As part of that, we'll figure out what the process for adding that rating. So I can't answer that question right now. And then adding it to, it seems likely that it would be available for Harvest Day next year in September. I say likely because, I mean, maybe the experiment goes horribly wrong in the Middle Kingdom and we can't handle Adelanto and we end it after a month. I think that's unlikely. So it seems likely that it'll be available, but I can't guarantee that.
My intent is to get the rule book written and set up and out for comments this winter. So come spring, we can start setting up ranges and see how it works and getting marshals trained. And I really hope we can have it all set and ready to go midsummer or in the fall. So yes, September should be very viable for it.
I would say that Harvest Days will still be experimental at the time, though. I don't believe we would be able to get through enough comment and enough cross-training between our martial art activities to have it be fully vetted by Harvest Days when we can't really get a good start on it until April. I think is probably conservative. Probably May is a more realistic estimate of us being able to start. I think, Dietrich, that's where you're at on it.
Yeah. The earliest I think we could do anything would be Better Worth Archery. If we set up a demonstration and, see if we can recruit some of the people who have experience with it, that would be our first opportunity at the very best.
Makes sense. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, that sounds like a no. Uthan, do you have any final comments for this evening?
I'm just looking over the comments real quick. It looks like no. I believe that we're good. I did have sorry, my technical writer. So we should have the book out for comment within a couple of weeks. I am letting her know to remove the darts portion of it so that way we can move forward on it. And with that, we should be able to see something for comment within a couple of weeks to the populace, and hopefully have a full ratified version of the new missile weapons handbook going into 2023.
Right, and you'll send that to me first too, right, with them, before we put it out for commentary?
Yeah, I'll send it to you, and then I'll allow you to send it out for commentary based on whether or not you feel it's good enough to go out for it. But that'll be your call to make. If you feel I need to make any adjustments, we'll go forward on that one. If anyone else, before the comments or before anything happens, has very strong feelings on things that is currently missing from the current missile weapons handbook, thrown weapons handbook, and would like it to be considered for addition before we even go through the comment process, because you know it's glaringly omitted. Thrown weapons, the mid-realm thrown weapons email is the easiest way to contact me. I check that every single day. Trying to get in touch with me through Facebook or another means is worse than hit or miss. It's like trying to throw your axe by the handle backwards while blindfolded. Good luck. The email is going to be the easiest way to get a hold of me. So if you know there's something glaringly and blaringly omitted from the current missile weapons handbook that you feel should be added before it even gets to His Grace Kellick, please email me and I will look at getting that put out before we have to go through the process of doing it all over again after you realize it's something that's still glaringly missing. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Diedrich. Do you have any final comments?
Couple thoughts. Training marshals has come up, and I absolutely agree. We need to always keep working on that. We have started a process of developing archers colleges. I'm hoping to get one per region each year. That's a good opportunity for that. Ongoing training is always a thing for everything we do in this hobby. So we're trying to keep adding to that. Also, for anybody with questions about archery in any way, feel free to email me or any of my regional deputies. We have a very good crew these days who will be happy to help. Things like recruiting a marshal for an event. Your regional knows who's around and can help network. That kind of thing is part of the job. We'll be happy to help with any of that.
Great, thank you. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out, taking part of your evening or your week to help join in to help us try to make things better and more enjoyable for everybody. So I appreciate your time. My marshals, I appreciate your working and helping out with that too. So I'm going to stop the recording and you all have a good evening.